Welcome to the channel. This is Oblivion, and this is the ultimate Duo Ike guide. We are going to analyze him, go over builds for PvE, Arena, Ether Raids, and Summoner Duels. We will also go over his best supports and the mythics that work best with Duo Ike in both seasons. Lastly, we will dive into Summoner Duels to discuss the best ways to use Duo Ike. Let's get started. We have a lot to talk about. First thing we need to do is analyze Ike as a unit. He has 182 BST. He has super boons in attack and speed with super banes in HP and resistance. He has your typical God Sword stat line with high attack, high speed, decent defense, and lower resistance. But if you want to know what makes Ike a truly powerful unit, we need to look at his preference weapon, Sturdy War Sword. Grants attack +3, and as long as your HP is above 25%, you're going to get +5 to all stats. The cool effect though is if units attack triggers special, so these are offensive specials like Moonbow, Ruptured Sky, Radiant Ether obviously, and even AoE specials. As long as you're running one of those specials and you have one or more units within 4 spaces, you're going to gain one of these effects. So if you have one unit within 4 spaces, you're going to get +X special cooldown before first attack. That X is going to be half of the total of your max cooldown. So for the example of Radiant Ether, you're going to get 2, but if you're running something like Moonbow, you're only going to get 1. Now this may seem like a simple effect, but in all honesty, it's much more powerful than people are considering. So the way this weapon works is you will go into combat, and before your first hit, you're going to get that +X special cooldown. So in the case of Radiant Ether for this example, you get +2. But then that does not count the actual hit itself. So you will still get extra cooldown on that first hit. So you can easily charge a 3-turn special cooldown with no special acceleration, and you could get like a Luna on your second hit. And that's even without the opponent counterattacking. Or you can do something more interesting and you can run something like Flashing or Heavy Blade, which will then give an additional special cooldown, allowing you to run 4 cooldown specials and be able to activate them on your second hit, even against opponents who don't counterattack. Now this obviously works really well with Radiant Ether as well in an enemy phase build. You can run something like Darting Breath, get hit, get 2 special cooldown, and then this weapon will activate and will allow you to Radiant Ether on that first hit back, allowing you to get the big heal you really want to get with Radiant Ether. Now let's move on to the second effect. So you have 2 or more allies within 4 spaces, you're going to get X% damage reduction against the first attack. X equaling max special cooldown times 10. So in the case of Radiant Ether, you're going to do 4 times 10, so you're going to get 40% damage reduction. It's a very powerful effect when you are running those high cooldown specials, which is what Ike really wants to be running. And then lastly, you're going to get Null Follow-Up as long as you have 3 or more allies within 4 spaces. Once again, one of those key God Sword skills you're definitely going to want. Now let's go ahead and look at the range of Ike's weapon so we can really get a clear image of how big this range is. So first let's look at Ether Raids. And as you can see, it covers a majority of the map with only a few corners really being missed out. So in Ether Raids, you're going to have a very easy time keeping this effect up. So while this image does do a good job of portraying how large the range is, it doesn't show you exactly the full amount. So let's go ahead and jump over to a Rival's Domain map, and you can get a bigger idea of just how massive this range really is. Even on this extremely large map, you still don't get the full range of his weapon's effect. A little bit is cut off on the right side, but as you can see, it's absolutely massive, and it's going to be easy for Ike to get those full effects on a majority of maps. Though I will admit that on Summoner Duels, sometimes it can be a bit problematic if you want to play really aggressively. The last major thing we have to talk about when it comes to Duo Ike is his Duo skill. So this Duo skill is going to inflict attack and speed -7 and guard on foes within 5 rows or 5 columns centered on unit through their next actions, and inflict special cooldown +2 on those foes, and this can be used once per map. Now once again, this Duo skill has an absolutely massive range. Right here you can see that it covers essentially the entire map of Ether Raids with just those 2 tiny corners missing, and if you take 1 step to the right, it's going to cover those as well. So you're not going to have any problem hitting this in an Ether Raids map, though of course Duo's Hindrance is going to be problematic, so you're going to have to take out those Duo units or the Duo's Hindrance to get the most out of it, and because of that, it's going to make it a bit difficult for Ike to actually make the most of this in Ether Raids. Next, let's get a clear image of just how big this Duo skills range really is by looking at a Rival Domains map, and as you can see, it almost covers the entire Rival Domains map as well. So it's absolutely massive range. You're not going to have a problem hitting it on units when you can use it. And it is extremely powerful. The attack and speed -7 is massive. The guard is going to make it so that it's difficult to proc those specials. But really the most important part is the +2 special cooldown on foes. This is going to reset specials, and in Summoner Duels, it is absolutely massive. You can turn off Hardy Fighters, you can turn off Lethalities that are pre-charged, or really pretty much any other special. With the proper use of this Duo skill, you're going to be able to cripple your enemy team and allow Ike to really dominate his enemies. Now that we have a basic understanding of how Duo Ike works, let's talk about some skill options, because this unit has a ton of options he can run in pretty much every slot. So first we have the A slot and we have Distant Dart. This is his go-to basic A slot. It is amazing and great, but if you do want to run some other options, for example if you want to do like a far save unit covering Ike, you could do something like Swift Stance, Kestrel Stance, or Steady Posture 3. All of these are great options depending on what you need. They can also be pretty good in Summoner Duels, where you may want to use Ike as a front liner but focusing on those melee matchups and having a far save unit in the back to protect him. 3 other great options are Attack Speed Ideal, Attack Speed Unity, and Attack Speed Soul 4. These are also great in Summoner Duels. Attack Speed Ideal is going to allow him to have those stats as long as he has a buff or he's at full HP, which means that he can pretty much position however he wants and ensure that he's getting that attack and speed. Attack and Speed Unity is going to allow him to have protection from those debuffs, which can be very common in Summoner Duels. And lastly, Attack and Speed Solo 4 is going to let Ike go completely ham as long as he's by himself, and he's going to be able to run in and get those big hits off while sustaining the speed he needs to make sure he doesn't get doubled. Next, we have the B slots, and we have No See Disrupt. Honestly, this is a decent B slot. It's good if you're trying to do the Omni Take route in Ether Raids, but other than that, it's not my favorite. Another great option is to run double damage reduction, doubling up from the weapon, and then also giving a damage reduction in the B slot. If you plan on spamming specials, something like Spurn can be very good, but Close Call is amazing for something like in Summoner Duels where you can go in, get the hit, and then bounce backwards, and usually into the safety of a far range unit. Lastly, we have Frenzy, and Frenzy is an interesting option. It's good if you want to build a very player phase offensive Ike. Because of his damage reduction, more often than not, he's going to be able to survive that first round of combat. And if he gets below 50% HP, Frenzy is going to allow him to go in and just spam some big specials and completely destroy the enemy without ever taking a hit. So it is a pretty good and interesting option, but not so much if you want a mixed phase Ike as much as if you want a player phase one. Next, we have the 2 lows, so low speed and defense and low attack speed. Low speed defense is obviously going to allow Ike to hit way harder, ignoring those defense buffs. But personally, I think actually a low attack speed is better on Ike. It's going to allow him to tank those hits much easier and make sure that the opponent can't get that speed advantage on him, because Ike is very susceptible to doubles. So if he does get outsped, he is going to take that second hit at full damage unless you're running some speed-based damage reduction. Next, we have a super premium option from Young Mia, Speed Defense Tempo. This is a great option as Ike can be weak to guard, as it can stop him from getting his specials, especially if you're relying on something like Darting Breath or something like that. This will protect him from that, and it also technically gives him more speed and attack with the -3 speed and the -3 defense, so it's pretty nice. Then lastly, we have Special Spiral, and I actually love this option a ton. It makes Ike much more mixed phase and allows him to spam Radiant Ether on both phases, which is a ton of fun. Next, let's go down to his C skills. He comes with Joint Drive Attack. Honestly, it's not my favorite. I wish he came with Joint Drive Speed, as that's what he really needs to secure himself and make sure that he's not getting doubled. Attack Speed Menace is also a decent option. It's not my favorite either though, because sometimes it is difficult to get units in that range so you can actually hit them with it. Then we have Times Pulse, and this is actually a pretty interesting option that I think people aren't talking about yet. What this does is it allows you to not have to run Darting Breath, because what will happen is your cooldown will go from 4 to 3 with like something like Radiant Ether. The opponent will hit you, so it'll go down to 2, and then Ike's weapon will charge the last 2 before he attacks. So this is actually a pretty good option on Ike, and it is kind of unfortunate that he didn't get the cooldown reduction in his weapon, though it would have affected his damage reduction. And then lastly, we have Even Tempest. Technically, you're an Odd Tempest as well, but I typically find that Even Tempest is better, and this is mostly for something like Summoner Duels, where you're going to want that extra movement to either position well or to be able to reach the enemy team. Unfortunately, this isn't the easiest fodder to get, as it's only available on Dagger, Brave Marth, and one other unit, so it's not too easy to get, but it is a very good option for a C slot, so you can allow Ike to go super offensive. When it comes to assist skills, Reposition is going to be amazing. You can use stuff like Drawback or Swap, but typically I think Reposition is going to do the job the best, and then for Arena you can run something like Rally or Harsh Command. Now we get to the more interesting thing, specials. And Duo Ike actually has a ton of options. So his go-to obviously is Radiant Ether, the special he comes with, his preference special. It is obviously a good skill, it's just straight up better Ether, but it is a little bit lacking compared to the new specials we've gotten, like Vital Astra, like Lethality, or Deadeye. So if you're trying to go for like a really offensive Ike, I would recommend actually Dragon Fang as a 4 cooldown special. You can technically run Ignis, but typically he's going to get more damage from Dragon Fang, and you can actually do some amazing builds with Dragon Fang. We'll show off in a little bit. Vital Astra can work on him, though you're typically not going to get the damage reduction part of it. It's just going to be a nice big hit. Next, he can run something like an AoE special, which is a bit weird. What you need to actually do is to go into combat first, 1 round of combat, and then after that, you can pretty much spam AoE specials consistently after that. The last thing we'll talk about are some seals. Darting Breath is his go-to seal. It's pretty much going to allow him to hit that Radiant Ether every single combat and on the first hit, so you're going to get that juicy heal. Very good. Attack speed solo 3 is amazing. It's going to allow him to stack speed, and in a game mode like Summoner Duels, you're definitely going to want to have that speed so you can be offensive in both player and enemy phase. Speed Res solo 3 is a great option for Ether raids if you are using a support that has special acceleration, so something like Brave Lucina or New Year's Valoria. Lastly, you have the 2 stand skills if you're going for a really enemy phase oriented build. Now that we have a basic idea of how Duo Ike works, let's go ahead and look at some builds. So the first build is going to be his budget build. Very simple, you take his base kit, throw a reposition or a positional skill on him that you like, and then Darting Breath. This is going to allow Ike to be a very powerful enemy phase unit, and he's going to essentially fulfill that role of a god sword. Now if you want a more mixed phase Duo Ike, you can run Special Spiral in his B slot and then Attack Speed Solo in his Seal. What this is going to allow him to do after that first combat, he's going to have his special charge and he's going to be able to spam Radiant Ether. And I don't mean like Legendary Ike spam Radiant Ether. He takes it to a whole new level. Because of the way his weapon works, he will always have his cooldown at 2 special, which means when he goes to engage on enemies as well, he will charge that Radiant Ether before he attacks and completely annihilate his enemy. The best part about this though is that he's not weak to guard with this build, because the weapon effect has no interaction with guard or hitting the opponent. This is a great build for a mixed phase Ike, definitely a lot of fun, and it doesn't take much investment, which is the best part. The next set of builds are going to be the AoE and Arena build. So first we have the AoE build, and this build is pretty fun, but I wouldn't use it seriously. There's not very many game modes where you're going to be able to do this and actually successfully use this build. It can be fun though for like PvE or something else. Essentially you're going to stack life and death on both the A slot and the seal. And then once you do 1 round of combat, you're going to be able to just spam AoEs. Ton of fun with that massive 73 attack on Ike. And this isn't even plus attack or any investment at all. So you can imagine how high it could get with some investment. Next, we have your typical Arena build for Ike, plus 10, plus 5 Dragonflowers, the full investment. You can run all kinds of options. Personally, I like to run a lull for Arena just because you are going to be running into a lot of rallies, which means that units are going to have additional attack and speed, and that lull can just remove that and not have to deal with it. If you want to, you can also run something like Time Pulse in the C slot because he doesn't have a B preference skill. He can still score max with a 240 SP C skill. And with Time Pulse, you can change Darting Breath to like Attack Speed Solo, so you can have a more offensive Ike if you want that as well. Tons of options with this unit, so definitely feel free to switch around some skills to make a build that you enjoy. Next, we have 2 builds I discovered, and they are so much fun. And you may be thinking, Oblivion, did you really sacrifice all that fodder to Ike? And the answer would be yes, other than even Tempest, because I don't have the fodder, but I would if I could. So this is kind of a max investment build. You can do it earlier, you can do it at +0, but it is a lot of fodder, so definitely consider that before you do it. So essentially this is the Immortal Ike builds, and what this does is this is going to allow Ike to just go completely ham on your opponent. You're going to be able to run in, and because of the way his weapon works, you're going to go in, attack, and when you attack, you're going to get the -2 special cooldown from his weapon before the first attack, and then when you hit, because of Flashing Blade, you'll get another 2 special charge. This means that you'll be immediately hitting with the Radiant Ether on the second hit. It's going to do the 50% defense reduction, you're going to heal for 50% of the damage done, but because of Surge Sparrow, you're actually going to heal for 90% of your max HP. So pretty much with Radiant Ether, this is a full heal on every single combat. It's completely insane, it's super fun. Ike still has the damage reduction in his weapon, so even in enemy phase, he can take a couple hits as long as he's not getting doubled. And he does kind of miss speed on this because obviously Surge Sparrow is only player phase, and Flashing Blade takes up that seal, takes away the speed from the seal slot. So it is a bit dangerous. You're gonna have to like play with it, but this is a lot of fun. I'm not really sure what game mode to use this in. I tried to use it in Summoner Duels, and I got punished a lot, but it was really fun when it worked. Like watching people explode is super fun. Speed defense tempo is obviously some premium fodder, but it does ensure that your Flashing Blade is going to allow you to get that 2 special charge. So it is very good in this build, but you can run something different. You could run something like low attack speed or low speed defense and get a very good effect as well. Next, we have the same build, but we're using Dragon Fang. And what this does is essentially, this just pushes the damage numbers higher With max investment, Ike is going to get able to get something like 42 attack from his Dragon Fang on this. It's super awesome. He just goes in, completely annihilates somebody, and then heals the full health. It's super cool. Awesome build. Obviously a lot of investment, so this isn't going to be for everyone. And it's not absolutely practical, but it's a ton of fun. Next, let's jump into some Ether Raids build. So our first build is a very basic build. You're just going to throw Darting Breath on there, and that's going to allow Ike to spam Radiant Ether, getting that big heals. Now be a bit careful. God Swords have kind of fallen out the meta a bit. There's a lot of dangerous things out there, and Ike can struggle against things like Duo Lift, Fatal Smoke, Precharged Deadeyes, Duo Crom. So definitely make sure you give him enough support if you want to do this kind of build. If you're going to use a support unit like Brave Lucina or New Year's Valoria, you can take off that Darting Breath seal and give him Speed Res solo, and that is going to actually be amazing because Ike needs as much resistance as he can possibly get. As you may have noticed, I have Air, Dagger, Mila, and Puny buffs on this Ike, because when you are doing an Omni Tank build, you're going to need every single stat you can get, and especially resistance for this Ike, because his resistance is naturally low. And that is why I partially like Light Season, because you can get a ton of resistance from your Mythics, and then also Speed Res solo is going to give another 6. So definitely something to consider. Okay, our next set of builds are going to be 2 more Ether Raids builds. This is going to be a melee specialized build. So this is going to be something you use with a far save unit in the back, protecting Ike from those ranged attacks. And honestly, I think this is a pretty good idea, as a lot of the things that Ike is going to struggle with are ranged units. And so by doing this, you can make him specialize in those melee matchups, overall allowing him to be a lot stronger. So this is going to give him that guard even when he's not using his duo skill. Low attack and speed are going to make sure that those buffs get cancelled out, and then attack and speed solo are going to make sure that he's quick enough so he's not getting doubled, and he's also putting out enough damage to secure those wins. Next build, we have a maxed out Ike, and he's going to use extra damage reduction in his B slot. This is also a very powerful option, as it's going to give him that extra damage reduction he needs in addition to his weapon, which is going to be great, and it's going to allow him to really destroy a lot of those melee matchups. Now, if you aren't using a support like Brave Lucina or New Year's Valeria on your team, Darting Breath is going to be amazing, as it's going to secure those Radiant Ethers that you're going to need to survive and also to secure kills. Now, before we're done with Ether Raids, let's jump over to the Mythics and do a quick analysis of the best Mythics for Ike. Okay, let's start with Light Season, and I do think Light Season is the better season for Ike, especially if you're going to do the Omni Tank route, because that resistance you're going to want is all over these Light Mythics. So let's do a quick analysis of the best Mythics, and I think this is pretty much the order I have them in. So Peony is going to offer Dance, she's going to offer that very important Speed Mythic buff, Formation buff, and as well as the Attack and Speed +3 in cardinal directions. Next we have Mila, and Mila is absolutely amazing. Not only is she going to give you the Isolation, she's going to give you +2 to all stats. The extra turn can be nice, obviously. Most of the time it's not going to do much, but once in a while it will. Defense buff, which is super solid, and then most importantly, she is going to soak your Dark Shrine. She can very easily stack up enough resistance and defense to have higher stats than Duo Ike, which means that she'll be hit by all those Dark Shrines, protecting him from them. As someone who's been using Fallen Ike, I personally hate Mila because she's always stealing the Dark Shrine buffs, but in this situation with Duo Ike, you definitely do not want him getting debuffed at all. After that, we actually have Air, and Air is amazing. So you can run Tamari on her, which is going to apply that -5 attack and speed debuff. She has flying mobility. The Sparkling Boost heal is amazing. It gives that +5 extra resistance, which Ike desperately wants, and it also heals him for 20. So when you get to your turn, not only will you get the healing from Radiant Ether in combat, you also get that 20 healing at the beginning of the turn, which can be massive because it's going to hit Ike wherever he's at. And then lastly, she's going to give that resistant mythic buff, which Ike desperately wants. So Air is going to offer +10 resistance, which is absolutely massive, and is going to allow Ike to do way better in those ranged matchups. After that, we have Dagger. She has Pathfinder. She's also arguably the best unit to soak Bright Shrines. You can stack like Life and Death on her, and she'll get hit by that Bright Shrine, and because she has the Unity effect in her weapon, it will actually make her stronger, so that's amazing. And then she has the Resistance Mythic buff. Then you have Ashe and Euler, and Ashe is an amazing unit. She's great for the teleportation, the joint drive attack, and she's just a great combatant unit. But overall, I would say she's less desirable than the other 4. And the same thing with Euler. Euler's going to be able to give that Speed Mythic buff, which is very nice. And she can also soak the Bright Shrine. But other than that, she's really not offering much to your team. So essentially, I would only really use those 2 if they are bonus units. And if not, I would try to stick with the top 4. Next, let's talk about the Astra Mythics. When it comes to Astra season, I honestly don't recommend using Omni Tank Ike. I would definitely use the Far Save build so that you have a Far Saver protecting him, because it is a lot more difficult to get resistance in Astra season, and Ike doesn't have the best resistance. So first let's talk about Plumeria. Obviously, speed mythic buff with a dancer, attack and resistance. Great unit. Don't really need to explain why Plumeria is so great. She's definitely going to be the best mythic you can get with Duo Ike. Next we have Elamine. Elamine's amazing. She has false start. She's going to be shutting down things like Time's Pulse, Bridal Catria, and so much else that's going to threaten to kill Ike. She also gives the speed mythic buff, which in this situation is very good for Duo Ike. She gives defense and resistance +6, so you don't need to run those buffs, and 30% damage reduction. So obviously Elamine is an amazing unit to support Ike. Next we have Thor, and Thor is essentially going to be there for the job that Brave Lucina or New Year's Valoria would do, where she's going to offer that special acceleration that Ike wants, and it's going to open up his seal slot to get more stats. And whenever you can get more stats in Ether Raids, it's always a good thing. And then lastly, she's going to give that defense mythic buff, which is very good if you're running him with a Farsaber. And then after that, we have Ashera, Regan, and Naga, and they all have some benefits. Obviously, Regan is an amazing unit with her Kanto and her Satyr Shell, so she's going to be able to clear out buildings and also deal with some annoying matchups. Ashera is going to offer that attack and res buff and null panic, which is very nice for a unit who is weak to buffs. And then lastly, Naga. Naga has the defense mythic buff, which is okay, and dragon effectiveness, which can be okay, but honestly, she's not the best. I'd only really run her or Altina in their bonus weeks. The other major thing to consider in Ether Raids is going to be supports, and Ike has a ton of great ones. First, let's talk about those special accelerators. So we have Brave Lucina and New Year's Valoria. Brave Lucina is amazing as she's going to offer a ton of stats to Duo Ike, and that's really what he needs overall. Next, we have New Year's Valoria, and New Year's Valoria is a bit different. She can offer stats like Lucina, but not nearly as much. But what she does offer is a more mixed phase Ike, as well as a more offensive support. So if you're looking for a support that can get into combat and take out some enemies on that turn after Ike gets engaged on, the New Year's Valoria might be what you're looking for. Next two supports are more damage reduction. So if you're looking to lay on as much damage reduction as possible, a unit like Flame is going to be amazing. She's going to give extra 30% damage reduction, though that is multiplicative and not additive. Next we have Niffle, and Niffle once again is like the offensive option of Flame. She is going to give damage reduction in Domain of Ice, and she can give that drive speed if you want to do that as well. The great thing about Niffle is if you properly use Ike, he should never be getting doubled, so the damage reduction she gives on that first hit will be enough, and at the same time she's going to be offensive, so she can go in, kill something, and apply flash, which then can allow Ike to go in and finish off the rest of the team. And the last support we have to talk about is Harmonic Azura, who I believe is the best dancer for Duo Ike. Now, this is not only because I believe Azura to be the best dancer overall, but because of Leanne. Leanne actually makes Azura better in this situation, as she allows Azura's harmonic skill to hit Duo Ike, which is absolutely massive and amazing. This is especially important in something like Summoner Duels, as it gives a target for that skill and makes it much more valuable. But even in Ether Raids, once you kill the duo units, being able to give Ike another action is going to be amazing. So when it comes down to the builds, there's essentially two you can run. You can run a standard build, where essentially what you're going to be doing is just giving that crossbow res, also the +6 to all stats from the dance, and then a chill attack. Next we have the Summoner Duels HP stack build. So this is a build where essentially you're going to want to give as much HP as possible to Azura, so either through like summoner support, merges, HP in the seal and A slot, and the whole goal of this is to make her an even pulse type bot. She's going to take out those specials that are super annoying on the enemy team. She's going to provide support through her dance, +6 to all stats buff, crossbow res, and that harmonic skill that can give Ike another action, which is absolutely massive, as you can go in, hit with Ike, have Azura dance him, hit again, and then even harmonic skill and go for another round. It's absolutely amazing, and she's easily the best dancer to run with Ike in Summoner Duels. Lastly, let's talk about Duo Ike and Summoner Duels. Now this is the mode I feel like Duo Ike should shine in the most. I've been playing a ton of matches and he can be extremely powerful, but he does have some weaknesses. And it's really going to come down to the build you give him and how well you use him to see how he performs. So let's first talk about two defensive options. So first we have the defensive build for Summoner Duels. This is going to be a build you're going to use with a Farsaber, and the point of this build is to get Ike up into a choke point and let him sit there while you use other units to get around and hit those units you need to kill. This is pretty solid because what this is going to do is going to give Ike guard, it's going to give him that extra layer of damage reduction, it's going to ensure that he gets those radiant ethers off so he can stay healthy. And what that will do is it will allow you to push him into a position where you could then use his duo skill to remove the hardy fighter from the enemy save and then use some other unit to kill that save unit and then allow Ike to push in. This obviously requires a lot of good strategy and planning, so it is not the easiest build to use. Another option for enemy phasing is the choke point build I like to use. This is going to have distant dart, close call, times pulse, and attack speed solo. This is if you want to use him without having to rely on a Farsaver to protect him. He can take on some ranged matchups with this build, and he can survive and retaliate with some powerful specials. Definitely will not be easy to kill. Now that we've talked about some defensive builds, let's talk about some offensive builds. And this build is a lot of fun. So you're going to have 2 attack speed solos, attack speed solo for an A, attack speed solo in the seal, close call, and even Tempest. And what you're going to do essentially with this build is you're going to set up, have a Farsaver in range of Ike, and then on the second turn you're going to go in and you are going to destroy somebody's face in, and then use close call to bounce back. Great build, lots of fun. Allows you to apply that pressure with Duo Ike and also give you enough damage reduction to survive some powerful foes. And then the last build I want to talk about is a raid boss Ike. So this is kind of a fun thing you can do. It does have some weaknesses obviously, but what you can do essentially is you run this with something like Legendary Ephraim or Astra, and you're going to stack some stats up. So something like Rallying Cry as your captain skill is going to be amazing, and you're going to let Ike get up in the enemy's face. He's going to have distant dart so he can retaliate. Low attack speed is going to be great against those enemies who are trying to use buffs against you, and he's going to be able to just carve right through them with a massive amount of stats he's going to get from the bonus doubler. When it comes to summoner duels, Duo Ike is a very interesting unit. A lot of his power does come from his duo skill, as it's going to just be able to shut down the enemy team on the turn it's used, removing those specials and also applying that powerful debuff of -7 attack and speed and guard. The thing is, he is a bit different than some of the other red swords that are meta in this mode, such as Brave Alm or Legendary Marth. He lacks some of the offensive power, but Ike is able to spam specials much better than those two, and he also has an easier time laying on those multiple layers of damage reduction. Only time will be able to tell how good Duo Ike ends up being in this mode, but so far I'm having a blast with him, and being able to shut down hardy fighters or pre-charge lethalities or any pre-charge special is amazingly powerful, and it can definitely shut down the enemy strategy. Overall, Duo Ike is a unique unit and extremely powerful, not to be underestimated just because he is another god sword. That special acceleration in his weapon is actually insane and can allow for some really fun and unique builds. Hopefully this guide answered your questions about Duo Ike and how to use him in multiple game modes. If not, feel free to ask any questions down below. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe, and also drop a comment telling me what you think about Duo Ike. I'd absolutely love to hear your opinions. This has been Oblivion, and I'll catch you all later with more Fire Emblem Heroes.